Hey guys, today we're going to take a look at the highly anticipated power paddles from 11Six24. These are going to come in three shapes, two that are familiar to us and one new one to 11Six24. For starters, they have the elongated Hurache, which makes a return with its rounded top and 6-inch handle. For the swing weight, we got 116, and the twist weight, we got 6.30. The Monarch shape makes a return as well, but it's now been rebranded as the Pegasus shape. But in terms of dimensions, it's similar to what the previous Monarch shape was. For the swing weight, we got 109, and the twist weight, we got 7.30. And finally, 11Six24 has released their first hybrid-shaped paddle in the Vapor. For the swing weight, we got 117, and the twist weight, we got 6.95. Now for the construction, these are thermoform paddles, though with a slight twist. They all use 16mm polypropylene cores, and for the face, they have the same CFC surface they have in their previous paddles. One layer of fiberglass sandwiched between two layers of carbon fiber. Like many Gen 2 paddles, they also have foam injected into the edges of the perimeter before being heated in a hot mold, but they actually use a larger and wider layer of EVA foam that goes around the core. Not a double layer of foam like some other Gen 3 paddles, but instead just one wider layer of foam in the perimeter. Finally, for the cell size, they use the standard 8mm cell diameter. With these being called power paddles by 11Six24, where would I rank them on the power scale? Well, I would place these closer to the bottom of the power paddle category, as they're not as powerful as the PaddleTech TKOs, but slightly more powerful than the Spartus Olympus. They aren't going to be super powerful and poppy like a Rhombus Ripple or Yola Mod, but more in a realm where I would call it a controllable power paddle. In terms of the feel, the powers have a very crisp feel off the face. You don't get a trampoline effect like the Yola Mods, and the ball doesn't really sink into the face. It's more of a stiff feel, but not unstable like a 14mm Gen 2. The ball still gets some decent dwell time, and I felt that this helped make the paddle feel stable on contact. It didn't have that hollow sensation some other Gen 3 paddles have. It's a unique feel since 16mm paddles generally have a bit more give in the face when hitting the ball, but overall I did like the feel of the Power series. In fact, out of all the power paddles I've hit, I would say that this power line is one of the most beginner-friendly ones, as it has a great balance of control, power, and sweet spot. The 16mm core with the EVA foam layer gives the paddle good forgiveness, and while the power level isn't the highest we've seen, you still get good amounts of power while we're still retaining good control on your shots. As mentioned earlier, the Power series do come in three shapes: the wide-body Pegasus, the elongated Hurache, and their new hybrid shape, the Vapor. Let's start with the Hurache. Out of the three, this is the longest one with the longest handle, so it does have the most reach and overall power. Compared to other elongated shapes, the handle of the Hurache is longer than average, and the swing weight is actually on the lower end, with the maneuverability being quicker for its shape, while the twist weight is around average. For me, this was my favorite of the three shapes, as I generally gravitate towards elongated paddles because of the longer reach and higher balance point. Since the handle is longer and the paddle isn't high in swing weight, I added tungsten tape on the sides and throat for my setup, and as of right now, this is probably my top choice for an elongated paddle. The wide-body Pegasus is going to be the quickest and most forgiving shape, with metrics that are pretty in line with other wide-body paddles. It's a fast and maneuverable paddle with good stability and sweet spot, and overall a very solid wide-body power paddle. That said, this was actually my least favorite out of the three shapes, because there's been a lot of recent power paddle releases this past year, and it does have some stiff competition already, like the Neonic Flare Prime X, PaddleTech ESQs, and the broken-in Pulse V from Pickleball Apes. I found it to be more powerful than the Flare Prime X, but not as powerful as the ESQs. But personally, I enjoyed the feel of those paddles more than the Pegasus. Again, I do think it's a really great paddle, as I like the whole Power series in general, and people will enjoy this one. But personally, I'm a bigger fan of other wide bodies on the market right now. Lastly, let's talk about their new Vapor shape. The website lists the dimensions as 16.25 by 7.75, and based on numbers, this does seem very similar to the Sword and Shield J2K. However, the Vapor has a flatter top that flares on the top corners, giving it a shovel-like shape, and it plays the complete opposite of the J2K. While the latter paddle is more bottom heavy, 11Six24 has opted to create a paddle that is more top heavy instead. The balance point of the Vapor is higher, and it gives the paddle a higher sweet spot compared to the J2K, which is a more stable feeling paddle, but one that has a lower sweet spot and thus less overall reach. You do notice a sharper drop off in power in the bottom areas of the Vapor compared to other hybrids, specifically the J2K, but for me, I just added some tungsten tape at the bottom corners to help alleviate this. I personally really enjoy the Vapor shape and think it's one of the best hybrid shapes out there because of how it's a more top-heavy paddle with a sweet spot in an area that I like, but I do think it does need tape down at the bottom areas to enhance its stability a bit more. In terms of the power, I found it to be more than the Pegasus and just under the Hurache, but it was closer to the Hurache than I expected. What's surprising is that I expected the swing weight to be in between the Pegasus and Hurache, but at least for the ones I've received, my Vapors had slightly higher swing weights than my Hurache paddles. One last interesting thing about the Vapors is that I found them to be the poppiest out of the three shapes. For both my Vapor paddles, they are noticeably louder than the power paddles from the other shapes, and it had more pop than the Hurache and Pegasus. Overall, I think it's a solid hybrid shaped power paddle, and 11Six24 has done a great job bringing a new unique hybrid mold to the market. And out of the three power paddle shapes, the Vapor is my second favorite. Honestly, I'm a big fan of the 11Six24 power paddles. 11Six24 didn't choose to do anything crazy in terms of making a paddle with insane firepower or a completely unique design, but instead, they've decided to release a very well-made power paddle product. I've used all the paddles with my team pretty frequently for the past few months and didn't find any noticeable changes in gameplay or any issues with durability during our playtesting that we definitely did experience with other Gen 3 style paddles. Like I mentioned earlier, I do think they're a more forgiving power paddle that's well balanced and many players will be able to pick up and use. It's an excellent entry from 11Six24 and my current favorite power paddle lineup on the market right now. They're priced pretty affordably at $169.99, and if you do want to pick one up, I've added my discount code here as well as a link to buy them in the video description below.